Hello and welcome to a very long and overdue video based on the Destiny album that was produced back in 2017, and I like to keep the things rolling in the time they were released, and this has taken a long time to output this video. I think there's a number of reasons why, and the main one is because I've forgotten uh, a lot of things, though I do remember the real reason for starting and creating the type of music that started to happen within this particular album, and then there was an adaptation of the music that went on from this moment onwards. Um, so yeah, I mean, I seem to be working quite extensively on music in my beginning phase. One project finished, then another started, and it was incessant, it was constant. And I think I've already mentioned in the Beyond Obsession EP merge album thing, there's 3 tracks on that album that would have been released on this album, but they just didn't feel right. Uh, but they were good enough to be released somewhere, but not as individual singles, or at the time I didn't believe that tracks uh, were just made for singles. They always seem to have to relate to a full album, a full project. Um, though I sort of broke my own rules at that point, and yeah, I was happy with what was ultimately produced with the Destiny album in mind. It all started with 3 tracks, the very 3 tracks from the top 4, should I say? New Year Day, Biting the Bullet, and Thunder, all just were in progress. They had a certain sound to them, and at the time, Matt from I Am Warface, we were discussing and talking, and we were thinking about doing a collaboration of at least one track, and that never materialised, unfortunately. Um, but New Year Day in particular was the track I had in mind for Matt to sing in. Um, Subsequently, there is no vocals in that track, and there's no lyrics for that track, though I was mulling over doing a number of things, even asking someone else I'd worked with before to perhaps work on that track, because I did think it was a vocal track. Um, However, it's got a nice sound and nice theme, and I thought it was a good start to the album, let alone obviously a new start to each year. Um, yeah, that progressed quite nicely. Biting the Bullet, on the other hand, was it was the title alone more than anything that was the main reason for that track, and trying to discover a sound for that. And I remember formulating the first 30, 40 seconds, thinking it sounded really good, but I really had to overcome some problems with that particular track, because as much as the lead on and start was what I wanted and what was intended, it was quite difficult to continue with it. Obviously, in the end, I discovered a way, and invariably, it became the track it did. Keeping things chronological, the next track on the album was called Axe Happy. Well, in my mind, uh, I thought, well, maybe it's time for a Hammer Blows sequel. I thought nothing better than this time using an axe rather than a hammer. Um, don't ask me about my mind. I really don't understand it myself sometimes. Um, but it, I don't even know if it was going to be called uh, or have the word happy in it to start with, but it just had this kind of madness about the track, and I thought, could you imagine someone wielding this axe and just, I don't know, going around using it all over the place? Um, it's not really, in many senses, a direct sequel to Hammer Blows, because it's got a totally different sound. But I had a visual, and there was intentions initially to actually make a video on this, uh, using a street scene and doing and demolishing quite a few things. But that never materialised. Um, and it's like a lot of things, once you've gone beyond that point, um, these things are consigned to history. So I'd have no reason really to go back into that period and think about making videos for albums and tracks that have been done before. Now and again, I may use stock library video and photos to highlight a particular track that I think was worth it or I missed. But I don't think I'd go extensively to go and create a full-blown video using cast and so on to highlight something from the past. I mentioned the 3 tracks from the first 4, so obviously Thunder being the third track out of the original 3 for this composition production. And you'll probably also notice Biting the Bullet and Thunder, they both seem to have gritty names, and that was what was evoked really from the I Am Warface sound themselves. I really quite started getting into this kind of rock sound, and as they call it, rocktronica. So it's a kind of mix, a merge of something. And this was really my progression going in. I know I'd done horror show previously, but I felt this is the moment now to go more rock myself to some extent. And that really sort of became the theme of the album, although I didn't really know it was going to become an album or where it was going. Bits of it seemed to be a bit misplaced. There was complications. I'm surprised even that I went to 12 tracks opposed to maybe finishing at 10. But Thunder, well, the track Thunder is what it is supposed to be. It's about thunder, rolling thunder coming on in. I had to have a brief listen to the album this morning to sort of catch up and remember the tracks as well. It may seem odd that I can't remember the tracks, but well, a number of years have passed by, and this album was produced many years ago, and I've done a lot of things since, and you do get taken over by the new work that you're working on, opposed to reflecting back on what you've done. I've probably mentioned it before. I've worked on something, got to the point of listening to it, re-listening to it, and then letting it go, and then that's where it goes. It just goes into the background, fills into the background, and disappears, and then it's up to whoever picks it up, listens to it, etc., to discover it. And then, of course, I also remember that Electronic Sound did a little review on this album back in the day, and I think they picked up on this particular track and derailed, which I'll talk about a little bit, because Frenzy is absolutely berserk. but then again, it goes back to how I started doing the music. If you go back to The Great Distraction, picking on a word and then working out what that sound reflects and how it should sound, and it's quite a mad, interesting track. Yeah, I mean, as I was listening to it, I think I must listen to this again, maybe pick up some ideas. I don't know, but I quite liked it. And Reaper, well, unfortunately, I suppose this is a problem, and you start to realise, even with other artists, as you listen to and buy other people's music, you realise sometimes that you can't hold a particular threshold with your music. As much as you want your tracks to all be the same level, some aren't. And doing a video like this, you'll reflect, or I'll reflect back on the music I've done. And with the track Reaper, it's okay, and it fills the slot, and it goes with, but there's nothing stand out, unfortunately, with the track. It's got its own thing, but listening back, I was thinking, why? And I like to be honest with doing these videos relating to the albums, but I do think that probably what you learn, well, that's exactly what you're doing. You're learning from producing what you're doing, and then thinking perhaps I won't do something like that again in the future. But this for sure would be what I'd call a filler track. The Long Mile. I suppose in my head I was reflecting back on a Richard Bachman book, and Richard Bachman, if you're not aware, was a pseudonym for Stephen King when he was outputting too much work, and the people publishing his work just couldn't keep up. So he went under a pen name of Richard Bartman, and The Long Mile just seemed a very appropriate again for this track, because it was obviously sort of horror orientated, and a very dark story. If you've never read it, it's well worth reading, trust me. And this particular track is a reflection of that particular work. Grind. Now, I love this track. It is again what it says it is. It's just gravelly. It's gritty. It's a I don't know, surge of power. It's just something that is grinding itself forwards and getting more powerful as it continues. I think I actually had problems actually finishing the track. I think it could have gone on for 20, 30 minutes. And let's have a look. I mean, it goes on for nearly 6 minutes as it stands. I did do a video for this using stock library footage, and I think it's okay. But I think when you make a video based on your music, it's always best to be hands-on and using your own visuals and ideas, opposed to other people's. But I felt it needed a video, if that kind of makes sense. But probably a better one than what I actually output. But saying that, I just think the music on its own is well worth listening to, and I'm glad I sort of rediscovered it this morning as well. Right, so now we hit upon Derailed. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't going to be able to find footage for a train crashing, and I didn't really want that, but I did. As this track evolved, it was obvious that it had this kind of momentum, and just like a rolling track, you know, just like the wheels on the train getting faster and faster as it was going, and inevitably, if a train goes too fast, it's going to come off the rails. So it's a complete reflection of that to some extent, and I borrowed the footage from the London to Brighton visuals you've probably seen, to sort of merge and make the video that I made and work within the same time frame. I think my dad had that actual video footage on an 8mm projector thing when I was young. So yeah, it was a merging my nostalgia with wherever I was in 2017. And then Impossible Dream. I mean, this is a. I don't know how to describe this track. It's quite wonderful. It's uplifting for sure. So it was almost pulling me back from the darkness, because this album inevitably is sort of, there's lots of murmurings of darkness within it. Almost pulling away from electronic, going more heavy into the industrial and rock sound, and I don't know, this Impossible Dream. I mean, that's probably why the track was named what it was, because I couldn't really identify what this track was. It was probably one of them ones where I was dabbling with music beforehand without the title, and that was another. Yeah, I suppose really this whole Destiny album was a time when I was trying to work the other way, trying to work with pieces of music, and then what do they sound like, and then use the words from there. And once I had a word or a title, then it was fairly easy going. Recommend listening to Impossible Dream. It's not a bad track, to be honest. Whereas Midnight Storm is sort of a very much going back to the Reaper track. It just does seem like a filler track. Probably didn't at the time, because you wouldn't work on something that's taking your time up. But again, going back to that period, I'd never give up on a track. So if I started and it was a minute, 2 minutes into, I wouldn't just throw it to one side and think, no, you know what, this is going wrong. I'd just carry on regardless. And I know that's not good for publicity or getting people to listen to your music, but I just want to be honest. I mean, I'm looking back and thinking there are, and over other albums too, I'd probably have dropped a few tracks along the way. So yeah, Midnight Storm does really become a bit of a filler track again, I'm afraid. And then Final Destination, I do actually think it's a nice way to finish the album. It's got a lovely, yeah, it's just got a lovely finish, lovely undertones, and it's almost like it's the, you know, it is the end of the album and end of that particular period. And ultimately, I think it's a good solid album that sort of started a transition within the music. And I think once you've started something and moved into a particular direction, it's kind of difficult really to then move away from it. And so I think this was the beginning of, well, maybe making the music more expansive to some extent, so I could go that way or I could go this way. You know, I could go in more than one direction. Um, and yeah, the I don't know. I just think it's a bit of an undiscovered album and one that's gone to the wayside a little. But I do think it's a worthy album, and I'm very glad finally I've been able to chat about it and get this particular video done, because that means I can go on and talk about the other albums and you know, reasons for particular things behind them. So thanks for tuning in and listening, and yeah, until the next one, take care. Bye bye.